Zoom is a mess tonight. Okay, hold on. All right. It says preparing to live stream the meeting. I think I have it.
Okay.
And then
We
I'll
are
shut
live.
off.
It's live.
Really?
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Please bear with us until we confirm that we're live on the book club page.
All right.
For those of you that have been waiting patiently, thank you
Have
for
fun,
sticking
my
with us
darlings.
throughout our
It is
technical
live.
difficulties.
I see us.
Yay.
I see us too.
We made it. We are late, but we made it.
Yay.
Better late than never.
Hi, everyone. Happy Monday, and welcome to the Friends and Fiction Official Book Club discussion of Surviving Savannah with one of our favorites, Patti Callahan Henry.
Yes, welcome, Patti, this evening. I want to give you a quick introduction before we jump right into things, because we're just so delighted to have you here, Patti. Patti Callahan Henry is a New York Times and USA Today best-selling author of 16 novels, including our subject tonight, Surviving Savannah. She's the recipient of the Christie Award 2019 Book of the Year, the Harper Lee Distinguished Writer of the Year for 2020, and the Alabama Library Association Book of the Year for 2019. But we know her best as one of the Fab Five, our Friends in Fiction co-hosts and now podcasters. And as if that weren't enough, they just hosted the outrageously funny one-year birthday party for Friends in Fiction that we're so excited about. And Patti, you do party favors well.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I am thrilled to be here, and we're all sorry out there that we're a little late. The tech world wasn't in love with us tonight, but we promised to go a little later. We're not going to gyp you. So.
Yes, definitely. I have to say, I watched the birthday episode 3 times because it was just so much. It was so much fun and seeing all the memories. How was that for you guys? I mean, how was that for you watching everything?
Well, I was so focused on hosting it that I watched it too, because it was even more fun the second time around, right? But it was, we don't pause that often. And you two, Peanut Butter and Jelly, work so hard for the book club. We work so hard for the show. Our community is so amazing between the two places that I think we forget sometimes to just pause and look what we have done. And I don't mean just we, like the Fab Five or Sean or Meg or you two. I mean the community, what we have done. It's pretty astounding. Yeah.
Well, it has just been so much fun. And we're just so looking forward to talking Surviving Savannah tonight.
So
if you could, Patti, yes, I'm going to just highlight mine back here. If you could, Patti, for those who haven't read Surviving Savannah yet, could you give us just a little summary of the novel and your dual timeline story that's so exciting?
Yes. So it is a dual timeline, meaning there's a modern day story and there's a historical story. The book is about the tragedy of the steamship Pulaski that happened on July 14th, 1838. It was a luxury steamship that blew up off the coast of North Carolina. I tell this story from 3 women's point of view. The first woman is a modern day woman who is curating an exhibit of the artifacts that have been resting at the bottom of the ocean for almost 200 years. And then I tell the story from 2 historical women's point of view. One, her name is Augusta Lamar, and the other, Lily Lamar, and Lily Forsyth, who was once a Lamar. They are the sister and the niece of a man who owned the ship. And I decided to tell it from their points of view so that we saw it from a completely different view than we usually see modern shipwreck books told.
Oh, that's just fabulous. We had lots of reader questions submitted in advance, and we're going to get to those in a minute. And please, those who are watching, put your questions for Patti in the chat also, because we're going to pull some of those. But I did want to ask you, Patti, about the artifacts. And do you have any artifacts that you can show us? Or could you just talk about how that all came about?
Yes. So I don't have any with me anymore, unfortunately. They do not let me keep priceless
Oh.
artifacts in my possession. I did have them during launch week, but I no longer am allowed to keep priceless possessions, gold and silver that have been on the bottom of the ocean. They trust me about this far, but not far enough. But so the artifacts are the reason I finally wrote this story. And you might find a million reasons why an author keeps going on a story. This is one I had never heard of. So when I first heard about the story, about the shipwreck, about the explosion, about the harrowing stories of survival, about the families that, had survived or perished, I knew there was something interesting, but I didn't know what it was yet. And I had that little tingle at the back of my neck. I knew something was happening, but I wasn't sure what it was. And then I hit 3 weeks into my research, I hit upon a headline that said, Steamship Pulaski found by endurance exploration, 100 feet deep, 30 miles off the coast of North Carolina. It was like my entire office filled up with like an electrical, pulse. And I had chills head to toe and goosebumps and chicken skin. And I was like, I am writing this. So the entire time I was writing it, I was talking to and working with the shipwreck hunter who was sending me pictures of the artifacts as they came up from the bottom of the ocean. So I'd be writing and he'd send me a picture of a candlestick or of a pocket watch. For example, there was a pocket watch with the glass blown and the hand stopped at 11:04 p.m., which is exactly when the ship blew up. So you immediately have this visual of this man standing there in his full garb and wearing his pocket watch and being near the explosion. Otherwise, why would that have happened? And so that became a scene. But there came a point, as there usually does for most authors, and if it doesn't happen for all authors, I don't want to know, but you hit the middle squishy part where you've left the shore to be nautical and you don't see where you're going yet. And you think, I can't do this. I don't know where I'm going. I might give up. I have a better idea. I think I have a better idea than this one. And for me, that happened because this story was so research intensive. And then I found out that they found the luggage tag, a little brass 4-inch wide, 2-inch tall luggage tag of my character, Rebecca Lamar.
Wow.
In the book, her name is Augusta Longstreet, but her real name was Rebecca Lamar. Just talking about it now, I get chills. I know you've heard the story 10 times, Lisa, and you still
gives me chills because if that wasn't, you're meant to write this book, what is?
And what to add on to pile on to the meant to, it wasn't that they just found her luggage tag. It's the only luggage tag they found so far. It wasn't that they found the luggage tag of my character. It's the only luggage tag they have found so far.
Wow.
That's amazing. That's just amazing. The thing about it is the story is so intense in both the past timeline with the wreck of the Pulaski and in the present day timeline that it's so enthralling to go through, and the characters, you just are on the edge of your seat with them as they're going through those experiences. And I find that timeline so compelling, but I did want to ask you a question from one of our book club members, Marjorie Boss Roberts, on the present day, if I could.
Please.
Because it folds right into what you were saying. She says, Patti, are you Everly, as the research unfolded for you? Is this what you went through yourself? She says, I'm blown away right now. I'm on chapter 18, where the weight of the tragedy took hold.
I am not Everly in personality or in background. I think sometimes as authors, we give characters things we wish we had. It's a way to live other lives,
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up moving around a bit. I was born in New Jersey. I know you don't believe that. Grew up in Philadelphia, moved when I was 13 to South Florida. And I have been living in Atlanta and South Carolina and Alabama for the past 30 years. But because of the way I moved around as a youngster, I enjoy writing about people who are 5 generations deep from the same city. So did I do that well? Thank you.
Not sure if that was Savannah or Charleston, but
I don't think it was either. I don't think it was either. So I don't think it was either. I'm blushing. So I think that it's interesting to give my character something I never had. So for Everly, being from a well-ingrained family of Savannah, it also giving her that allowed me to give you, as the reader, a history of Savannah, which was imperative for the story to be, if I was going to add depth and richness to the story. So Everly is nothing like me in that regard. I have never lost a best friend. And, I'm not a museum curator, but I am. Because everything she did in that book, except go into the attic of that abandoned house, is something I did. Meeting with the ships of the sea, I didn't get to meet with the shipwreck hunter in person, but meeting with the shipwreck hunter, talking about what it means to dive for these artifacts, going to the Thomas Owens house in slave quarters, discovering the stories behind the stories. All of the things she did in that book, I did for research.
Wow,
that's an interesting question. Way to notice. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that was a great question. We had a lot of great questions this time. And one of the things that I wanted to mention, and maybe if readers want to put this in the chat, I'm wondering, as far as identifying, there were so many wonderful female characters in this book.
Thank you.
And I know Lisa's going to ask you a question in just a moment about that, but I'll just stop and say, I'm curious about who everyone identified with the most. And I'm curious, Marlene Waters wanted to know what character you see when you look at your cover of your book. Who do you think of?
Oh, what an interesting question. You guys are the best question askers. I know. And then I want you guys to answer too. I definitely, that's Augusta. In my mind, because she's alone, she's not holding a baby, so it's not Lily. And thinks she's heading out for adventure. One of the first lines we hear from Augusta is, always wanted, never needed. No, always needed, never wanted. And, that's how she felt. Like, I'm here to help with the kids. I'm here to be of use, but I'm never wanted. And she's looking out towards adventure. She has no idea what's ahead of her. And I love the way that light looks like it's an explosion, that's what they're headed for. So
it really does. Before I read it or early on, I thought it was Lily.
Did you?
Yes.
I did too.
Did you? Okay.
So it can be anyone you want. It can be neither of them. It can be Eliza, right? It can be Melody. It could be any of the women who were heading out to sea with a completely, one of the things I say is, what they expected was a lovely 2 days on the water, 1 night in Charleston and only 1 night at sea. And yet we rarely get what we expect. So I love that woman feels expectant, but she has no idea what's coming.
Absolutely. Lisa, I think that goes right into the question that you had.
Yes, I do want to read a couple of the comments.
Oh, good.
Judy says Augusta is her doppelganger. I felt every feeling that she felt.
Oh.
And Bond says, oh, I identified with Augusta the most. She's tough as nails. And there was someone who said Lily. Or someone said they identified with Everly.
Oh, okay.
The most.
Oh, I love hearing this. This is interesting.
So,
for me, I felt closest to Augusta, but I think the reason that I felt the closest to her is because I had her Rebecca Lamar's actual account, and I read it over and over and over and over, almost to the point that I felt like she was telling me the story so that I could tell you the story. So.
Got it. I love that. I think I identified with Augusta the most as
Did
well.
you? Why? Tell me why.
Because she was tough and she just didn't give up. She, and I feel like I should say she inspired me the most.
That's awesome.
Like I wish I had some of that in me, if that makes sense.
You do.
I do, but not to that
do,
level.
Jelly.
Some of the decisions.
You don't know till you're in that. Lisa, let me tell you, when I was interviewing the shipwreck experts, one of the things they said was that people show who they really are in a moment like a ship exploding. Are you the kind of person who helps people get on the lifeboat, or are you the kind of person that throws a man overboard to save your own life? Like that,
right.
that true character rises up in a moment like that. And I can tell you would be like her.
Thank you. I hope so. I don't want to be the one that would throw someone over the boat.
They exist, those people, and you know
I know
them.
they do.
And you know them.
Absolutely.
How about you, Brenda? Who did you want?
It's hard because I did appreciate Augusta's fearlessness and her independence, but I thought Lily came such a long way.
Yes.
In the book that I was proud of her.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
I was proud of her too. And that's part of, I interviewed for this book, I interviewed someone on trauma and what it does to us. And because, as you know, part of this story is about how do we survive the surviving? Who do we become after something like this? And to the point of Lily, I learned of all these different ways that people survive and how they change. And I wanted to show, 3 different ways. Everly shut down, right? Augusta got firm resolve. She's going to save her life. She's going to save Thomas's life. She's going to save Charlie's life. And then Lily had this kind of transformation. So in interviewing a trauma expert, I wanted to show all these different ways that trauma slams into us.
Wow, that's just blows me away.
Oh,
I loved this book so much, but
thank you.
while we're talking about Lily, I do have a question. First, I want to thank you for the strength of the female friendships in this book.
Thank you.
And one relationship that really pulled at my heartstrings was Lily and Priscilla.
Yeah.
And the thought to have female friendships crossing racial lines during that time when it was
1838.
very rare, it didn't happen.
Yes.
And unfortunately, that's still relevant today.
Yep.
And I wanted to know what inspired you to highlight their friendship, especially during a time when it was so unaccepted.
I love that you asked that, and I love that you noticed it because it was very intentional. Part of my research was when I went to the Thomas Owens house in Savannah, which is a Telfair museum. And it's not just the Thomas Owens house of the 1830s, this grand house, and you get this great tour and you see how they lived in their silver and their china, and they ring the bell and the enslaved person serves them. But you also go see the slave quarters. They have totally refurbished them to be original. And as I was learning about how these people lived, I especially learned about this nursemaid that lived at that house and this mythology that they were part of the family. And I interviewed the woman who ran the Thomas Owens house, and she's in one of my podcasts, and you all should listen to it. The podcast is called Emancipating the Past. And yes, and she is genius at explaining why it's so important to emancipate the past from these nuggets of mythology that we like to tell ourselves versus the truth of what went on there. And I said from the very beginning when I was writing this story that I don't want to tell the story we've already heard over and over again, maybe from somebody else's point of view. I wanted to tell the story from all these points of view. What was it like for Lily, who owned an enslaved person with an abusive husband on a plantation? What was it like for Augusta, who's considered a spinster in her 20s? What was it like? And I didn't want to shy away from any of it. So I did some research into what it meant to be a nursemaid at that time. Like I said, the mythology of being part of the family. Because what I discovered at the Owens Thomas house was, yes, they said she was part of the family and they called her auntie, whatever. But they also sent her to the slave jail 3 times. You don't send your family to the enslaved jail in Savannah. The enslaved jail in Savannah was a horror, a living hell. And so I wanted to really show Lily's eyes, and of course, much more had to happen, but the scales kind of fall off as she saw Priscilla as a person who was nursing her child and keeping her child alive while they were lost at sea. Thank you for noticing.
Thank you for that. I loved their friendship.
I think about them a lot.
Yeah.
I don't want to
That
give
is
anything away,
interesting.
but I think about what they're doing. Might have, I don't want to give away the ending, but yeah, I think about them.
Sequel?
Well, I was just going to ask about that because one of our readers did ask about that, if you consider doing a follow-up book on some of the other passengers of the ship.
So, oh gosh, the passengers are endlessly fascinating, y'all. Brenda and Lisa know I did a thing for a couple of the events during the week of book release where you got a name and I told you what happened to you. Mm-hmm. And I did research on 15 characters for those events. I'm telling you, I could have written another short story about it. The endlessly fascinating characters, and y'all were given names and I told you what happened to you. And from Judge Rochester, whose father founded Rochester, New York, to Seabrook, to it's amazing the people that were on the ship and the families it affected for good and all, the cities it affected for good and all. But I feel like I've told the story of that night. If there's a sequel in here anywhere, it's what happened after. What happened to the families? How did they survive loss? Told a little bit about Charlie, but there are, there's, and the way it affected the cities. And I didn't even really touch on how much it affected Charleston also, because we really focused on Savannah because the family I follow is from Savannah, but it affected Charleston in a big way too.
I bet.
Oh, I'm sure it did. And then, so many generations have gone since that time period. I would think that it would that impact would have just multiplied over the generations.
Yeah. And yeah, there's one monument to the Pulaski. It's stunning to me that there aren't more, but there's one, and it's in Edisto, which for those of you who don't know Edisto, it is near Charleston. It's often considered part of Charleston, but it's a little island. And the big inn there is called the Seabrook Inn. And the Seabrook family was on the ship. And it's the only place that I can find any kind of monument for the Pulaski.
Wow. One question I'd like to pose to our viewers in the chat is, did you know about the sinking of the Pulaski before reading Surviving Savannah?
Oh, I want to know too.
I do too, because I didn't. I had no idea. And I live in Georgia. So I went to Georgia Southern, which is like right there.
It's right there. I bet you went to Savannah all the time, Lisa.
No idea. So I'm curious to know if anyone has. So we'll see what people say.
I wonder what they say. I can't see Facebook, so.
And I had no idea either. I'm not on the coast, but still, I'm just right there in South Carolina. So you would think.
I know, but Lisa,
I didn't either.
But Brenda and Lisa, it's such a huge thing that happened to South Carolina and Georgia.
Yeah,
it seems like something we would have learned about in our readings or our writings. But then again, listen, the word untold story lost to time, hidden stories, Those are catnip for a historical fiction writer. So, I mean, I probably wouldn't have written about it if it was well known. So,
Well, and I will say, if I did hear about it, I mean, if I did learn it in history, it certainly wasn't like the story that was Surviving Savannah, or I would have remembered it, right? So I have a question while Lisa is looking at the chat, because I'm real curious about the results. But this was a
I'm blown
fascinating
away.
question to me, since you mentioned Charlie. I hope I pronounced her name correctly. Asa Whittle asked, the man at the cemetery is wearing a red t-shirt. Is that a nod to the Red Devil?
Ooh.
oh,
And I just,
wow, probably
Love it.
subconsciously. Boom! I don't know.
Mind blown.
mind blown. Well,
Oh
it is
my
now,
gosh.
right?
I love when readers know what I did better than what I know what I did. And you know this, the readers know this, or they wouldn't be avid readers. Some really subconscious stuff sneaks into stories. So it very well probably was. But it was not intentional, on purpose, consciously. No.
Thank you. I was very curious about that. How are we looking, Lisa?
Well, I can say I've looked at probably 30 comments and they're all no.
They're all no.
I'm searching for a yes. So if someone has, please scream yes at me in the chat so I
All
can see
caps.
it. But I just see no. I had no idea. I didn't know until Patti Callahan Henry talked about it. If I didn't read Surviving Savannah, I wouldn't have known, but now I'm fascinated.
Yep. It was lost to time. I mean, when I heard about it, I was stunned I didn't know about it. You know, my daughter went to college in Savannah. I'm right here, right now. I'm right across the river where I'm sitting at the moment. So
one book club member said she visits Charleston yearly and's never heard of it.
I know.
I don't.
So
oh wait,
my goal is to make more and more people hear about it. I just and Brendan, Lisa, you and the three of us talked about this at the launch. The reason is to honor the people who were on it, not just because it's interesting that a ship blew up and sank, because ships blew up and sank a lot in the 1800s. And the coast of North Carolina, where this ship blew up, is called the graveyard of ships, a ship graveyard, because so many ships run into the shoals or get tossed in the breakers, so, you know, it's not a rare occurrence, but honoring the people who were on it and the harrowing ways they survived is worth writing about.
I can confirm we have 2 yeses now.
Yay!
Wow!
Glenda Harris and Judy Bell Payne both said yes.
Wow.
They knew about it.
That's amazing.
So we have 2, but I can also say we have over 200 people watching.
And you only have 2.
So 2 people.
Wow.
What is that? 1%, 0.5%? I'd be curious how they knew about it. They must be history buffs or real buffs about Savannah and Georgia. And yeah.
So Glenda and Judy, please share with us how you knew about the Pulaski, and we can go back and look at the comments.
We'll come back and look.
I'm curious about how many people who are researching their genealogy find out that they had an ancestor on the ship.
Now,
when I was doing my research for those 15 people, remember we talked about the people we looked up? That's how I found everything, was going on ancestry.com.
Really?
And if they passed away, it was obvious, because it would say, you know, July 14th, 1838 at sea. And I'd be like, well, ding, ding.
Yeah.
But for those who lived, it was a little harder. But yeah, Ancestry will really, you could probably put in a search or and the huge true to life exhibit, not the exhibit that was in my book, but the real one will be next spring. And there will be a full passenger list. And you can look, if you're from Savannah or Charleston or the area, you can look and see if, you know, there's some family names in there.
But you're responsible for that full passenger list, aren't you?
Yeah.
And that's a really interesting thing. That
It
you as
was
the author came up with that.
I just, and it's one of those things that made the book take longer maybe than it should have or could have. But it's also one of the things that I felt was really important to honor this shipwreck, because whether I'm writing about a real person like Joy Davidman or C.S. Lewis or Florence Nightingale or these people, I don't want to use them. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's, if I'm writing about them, I'm honoring them, and I don't want to get it wrong, and I want to do it fully. So that's just, that's not, doesn't affect the story, or maybe it does deep down, but I wanted a full passenger manifest. I just really wanted a full, I felt that this kind of piecemeal manifest somewhere in a magazine, somewhere in a newspaper, somewhere in an account, somewhere in a letter, somewhere, I just felt that wasn't, if I was going to write about this night in that ship, they needed a manifest.
Wow, that's just amazing.
Yeah, thank you. I was a teeny bit obsessed.
No.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Thing. No such thing. That's just awesome.
Well, I will ask a question on behalf of another of our readers, since you said that, Patti. Susan Seligman wants to know, she says your research on the book is incredible. How did you know it was time to put it aside and dive into the writing?
I do it at the same time, to be true. So it's not, I don't divide them up in that way. I don't, research for 6 months and write for 4 months. And I know a lot of historical fiction authors who do that, but I don't. I research enough that I start to feel the story. I decide who I'm going to write about. I decide what do they want? We talk about this all the time. Where are they headed? What do they desire? What is their debt? What are their misbeliefs? All those things. And then I start writing. Now, a lot of it you'll never see, but I need to be trying to work out the story while I'm doing my research, and it's always going on simultaneously. I know we'll talk about this later, but the book coming out this winter, same thing. I was writing the story, doing the research, finding something new that pivots the story, changing the story, moving the story. It feels very like a living thing, where for me, if I divide the research and the writing in half, I'm not letting them like mirror each other and flow together. One of my favorite things to do is find something in my research that changes everything. And then the story pivots or goes in a new direction. So.
And they weren't they still recovering artifacts too while you were writing?
Yes. And so if I had said, I'm not going to write this story until I have everything in one place, I'd still be writing it. But like I said, he'd show me a pocket watch and I'd put it in the story. He'd show me a candlestick and I'd go back to chapter 2 and add the candlestick, because the rough draft is a living thing. It's malleable. It's not like I'm carving David out of stone and then it's just is what it is. It's very malleable as I do my research and they show me artifacts and I can go backwards and slip it in and then pull the thread through.
That's true. We think of it as being sort of linear because we're reading it in sort of a linear fashion. But yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, so cool.
Now I'm hesitant. Oh, go ahead, Lisa.
I was just gonna say we started late, so now I'm giving the spoiler warning.
Okay.
So yeah, now our questions might have spoilers in them.
I happen to have a spoiler question from someone.
Go for it.
I do.
And oh, you do. Okay. Well, okay. I should have let you go first. But anyway, Rhonda Peretz says, and spoiler alert, turn your mute on or something. Turn your volume down. If you could have saved one person that was not saved, who would it have been?
Turn your volume down if you haven't gotten there. I would save Thomas. I mean,
Wow.
Oh, that broke my heart.
It broke my heart in 1,000 pieces, and it's real. And so I could have done the fiction writer's thing and saved him, because Lily is actually loosely based on his niece, on Gazaway Buglamar's niece, Eliza. And I give her a whole new life. Now, Augusta is Rebecca Lamar, and she's 100% factual for the character she's based on. And so the boys, you know, Charlie and Lamar and all the children. But when I hit that part in her accounting, I was like, no. So, yeah.
Yeah.
That was,
And my
that was
son's name is Thomas, so it was a little. I know.
Oh. Yeah,
oh my goodness.
that was tough.
Yeah, that was a tough one. It was hard to write.
I bet.
Yeah.
How long does it take to shake off when you write like scenes like that? Or
Yeah.
how long does it take to shake that off once you've written that type of scene
That's a
or
really
chapter, I should say?
That's a really interesting question. I don't know if I've ever been asked that. It's hard for me. I, especially if I've had kind of an intense scene like that. And then, you know, my husband says, "Did you pick up the dry cleaning?" I'm like, what are you talking about? You know? So, and sometimes I can feel irritated. Like, don't you know how important this, not my work is, but there's this tragedy happening in real time for me, even though it's 184 years old. So I have a little bit of a hard time. I almost feel like sometimes I'm like ripping my way out of a bubble, like pulling out the, you know, and coming out and having to reorient for a minute or two, but especially a scene like that. Yes. Interesting question.
I can't imagine, you know, my degree is in theater arts, so I've done projects where you put yourself in someone else's shoes.
Yeah.
And so I just can't imagine as a writer what that's like to shake it off, because it can be a process to get out of whatever.
I mean, you probably felt it when you're acting, right? Getting out of it?
Yeah, for sure. We have a question from the chat. And this is from Judy, one of our yeses. She says, when did you decide to have more related to a Pulaski survivor? Was it part of your original plan, or did it flow while you were writing her story?
It was not part of the original plan, but it came pretty early on, because I wrote the scene, the opening scene of the ship in the grandfather's study and the storytelling scene. And so I knew the ship was connected to either Mora or to Everly. And if the ship had been connected to, in fact, for a little bit, the ship was connected to Everly. And I realized as time went on that her mother was too open and willing to talk to let that be true. As their relationship progressed, it wouldn't have been in her mother's nature to keep that from her or her sister. So then I thought, well, maybe I knew it was connected. I just didn't know how. And then maybe it was Oliver, but he's from California. And then maybe it was just the museum, you know, maybe there was something there. But immediately when I met her mother, I was like, oh, that's what it is. When her mother opened that door and was so mean and bitter, I was like, yeah.
That's it.
I love the way you said it as soon as I met her mother.
Yeah. Ding, ding, ding. That's who it is. Yeah.
We have a winner.
Yeah. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. It's her mother. Yeah.
Well, that was definitely a good twist. One of our book club members, Leslie Bodeman, would like to know what prompted you to write the abuse angle with Lily and Adam?
So I wanted to show 3 completely different lifestyles, right? And it was very prominent in the 1830s, men who believed that they owned their wife and they owned their slaves and they owned their children, and that they had a God-given right to own these people. And in that belief that they owned their enslaved and their wife and their children, and that they were God-given, you know, patriarch, they were very cruel, because if you think about it deeply, if you really believe that about yourself, you believe those people are beneath you, below you, they're worth, you can hit them, you can abuse them, you can rape them. And because it's okay, because you're in charge. And when I read a lot about the early 1800s in the South, and there were some very good men, which I showed in Gazaway, which I showed in Lachlan, which I showed, really good men just trying to help to grow the city and do good things. But there were also some really horrible men. So her husband, Adam Forsyth, was based on a conglomeration or an amalgam of research on those kinds of owners and husbands and men of the time. And I wanted to show, I didn't want to just show this, like we talked about a few minutes ago, I didn't want to just show the mythological, glossy side of the antebellum South. I didn't want you to meet women boarding the ship, having their syrup drinks and wearing their pretty hats with their sweet husbands, and oh, the ship blew up. These were real people with real problems, and I wanted to give them some depth and clarity and not continue the mythology of the South in that way.
It's interesting to me too how descriptive you were in their thinking about those things, like their realization that these things mean nothing. The silk dresses and the china and all that. There's some just really powerful passages in there.
Thank you. Well, once I imagined being them, and once I learned what was on the ship, that's why the artifacts are so interesting, because what they show us is what mattered to these people, what they took on the ship with them. Their silver, their china, their jewelry, their religious reliquaries, their candlesticks, their pocket watches, the things that mattered to them, they took with them. And so I wanted the things that matter to them not matter anymore.
And that was pretty clear in those descriptions, and it was so poignant. The scenes on the sea it was just stunning. Well, I'm going to ask one more. This is going to kind of be lighten the
mood.
Lighten the mood a little bit.
We probably just lost 200 people for all our darkness.
This is too sad.
Exactly.
But this was another advanced question, and I just thought it was a hoot, because Sharon Person wants to know: does someone really walk a giant tortoise in Savannah?
Yes.
So
I met him. Yes.
Oh my goodness.
And it's so funny. I met him when I was taking a tour of Savannah. Like, I was taking a historical tour of Savannah when I was writing this book, doing my research. And indeed, he was walking down the street, walking his tortoise.
That just smacked of being true.
I can't make that. I can make up a lot of stuff, Brenda. I cannot make that up. I cannot make that up. I think I have a picture somewhere. I need to go back and find my picture. I'll post, if I can find the picture, I'll post it on our Friends in Fiction Facebook page.
Oh, that would be fabulous.
Yes, that would be awesome. Oh goodness, that's so funny. Well, now now that the mood's light, I don't want to go back.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, there was one question from your book club kit, and we have several people that said they printed out the book club kit.
Oh,
Thank
nice.
you for the book club kit. If you guys watching have not gone to Patti's website to see the book club kit, please do. There's a timeline, there's dates, there's questions, and one that I just thought was great and if you guys want to answer in the chat also, please do. It's about Everly and how she blamed herself for Maura's death, believing that she caused Maura to stand in the path of the oncoming car. So how does guilt impact grief? And why do you think we blame ourselves for things we don't have control over? I do that too.
We all do it. It's human nature. So I was talking a little bit before about the trauma expert that I interviewed, and about Survivor's Guild, and about how we hold these things in our bodies and how it affects our decisions in our lives if we don't process it, if we don't talk about it, if we don't, which I think is what happened to Charlie Lamar. But for Everly, there's by blaming herself and by saying it should have been me or it was because of me, it's a way of making meaning out of something that is meaningless. So when something is meaningless, our 86 billion, which is how many we have, brain cells are searching for cause and effect. They're searching for meaning. They're searching for control. And the way we do that, the way that we solve it when something is meaningless, is we make a story out of it. So here our brain is, here's Everly thinking, why did that happen to her and not to me? Is it my fault? And then she made up this untrue story about it so that she could have some control and make some meaning out of something that seemed so meaningless. But it was a false narrative and it was shutting her life down. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes
Absolutely.
sense.
It also just illustrated perfectly the different scenarios that were unfolding with the struggles people were having.
Yep. Whenever we survive something, we want to make meaning out of it. And for someone like Charlie Lamar, the Red Devil, he didn't, right? He didn't process it. He didn't talk about it. I met a man who has this fascinating book about the true Lamar family called The Slave Trader's Letter Book. And he says in all the family papers, Charlie Lamar never once mentioned the Pulaski again. Never once mentioned it, which means he didn't process it or,
Buried it.
Yep. And look what it did to him. It turned into a bitter, cruel man who could earn a nickname like the Red Devil. Let's let that be a goal. Like, that's not our nickname, right?
Right.
We have our nicknames, thank you.
You're fine. You're fine. You're good.
You already took care of that for us. We're good.
Yes, I did. It's hilarious.
Oh my goodness. Well, one quick question from the chat is, Carrie would like to know where the name Everly came from.
No idea. Sometimes I just hear a really beautiful name and I'm like, that's it. And sometimes I can tell you where they came from, but I love that name. I'm really happy with that name.
Yeah, it's perfect. Well, we can't let you go without talking about this gym, Reunion Beach.
Yeah.
That's coming out on April 27th.
In a week.
Can you share a little bit about what Dottie meant to you and how you got involved?
So for those of you who don't know, Reunion Beach comes out in a week. And last year, a little over a year and a half ago, we lost my really dear friend, Dorothea Benton Frank. And as we were trying to figure out how to honor her, what could we do? Because we had also lost Pat Conroy, about the year before, about a year and a half before that, maybe even two. And for him, there had been a compilation of essays about him, right? Like, this is who he was to me. I have an essay in there. It's called Princess Scribes. But for Dottie, we wanted something different. And so her editor, Carrie Farron, said that Dottie's new book that was supposed to come out last summer was to be called Reunion Beach. So she called some of Dottie's dearest author pals. It's me and, one of our Fab Five, Mary Alice, and Adriana Shergiani, the funniest human being on the planet, and Ellen Hilderbrand and Marjorie Wentworth, who is the poet laureate and wrote all the poetry for Dottie's books, and said, will you write a short story? And the only caveat is it has to be on a beach and it has to be a reunion. And then Carrie told me that the book was going to include birds of South Carolina, that Dottie had gone to her high school reunion and said that all the women were different kinds of birds of prey, crows, little flitty birds. And so she was going to use that. And she asked me if I would like to make that part of my story. So I did. So my story is called The Bridesmaids. And it is about a woman who is a woman who paints birds. And she is contemplating getting married for the second time and can't decide. and gathers her bridesmaids, and they're all in their 50s, to decide whether she wants to get married again. And the story's not Adriana's story is an imagined conversation between Pat Conroy and Dottie Frank in heaven. So there's just a wide variety of stories in this book. Y'all are gonna love it. So go get you one. Go get you one.
Oh, that's
great.
awesome.
Yeah.
I love the bird. I love the birds.
Yeah.
That's just amazing.
Thank you.
So 1 week.
One
Go
week
get it, guys.
comes out on the 27th. No, yeah, 1 week. A week from tomorrow.
Yeah, a week from tomorrow.
Yep. So, well,
Yeah.
tomorrow, you know, our beloved Christy Woodson Harvey's book comes out. So
Yes,
Yes.
we are so excited for that. And
Yeah.
we will be live at 6 p.m. tomorrow with Christy Woodson Harvey to celebrate her Pub Day. So
Yeah.
we hope you guys join us for that. And if you haven't pre-ordered Under the Southern Sky, please do. What are you waiting for? It's
I will
phenomenal.
be there. I will be there.
I love it.
One other quick thing, we definitely want to know if there's anything you could tell us about Once Upon a Wardrobe.
Oh,
We saw that the cover is gorgeous
it is gorgeous.
and that you've
Gorgeous.
seen the physical. Yes, I was going to say, we saw you open the box.
Yes. I'm really excited. It comes out on October 19th, which sounds far away, but isn't.
No,
And
not at all.
this is the book that kept me sane during the pandemic. This was my daily touchstone, the book that I returned, that and Friends and Fiction, the book that I returned to again and again. And it is the story of a little boy in the year 1950, November of 1950, which is the month and the year that a brand new book blew onto the scene called The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And this little 8-year-old boy is obsessed with the lion, the witch, and the wardrobe. And his older sister is a student at Oxford University. And he asks her to track down the author of the book, who teaches at Oxford, where she goes to school, and ask him only one thing. Where did Narnia from? And she doesn't want to do that. She's a math and physics major and thinks it's ridiculous. But she loves her brother. And so she tracks down, it's one of my favorite scenes. I'm grinning when she tracks down C.S. Lewis in his yard, in his field behind his house at the Kilns, and says, my brother needs to know, where did Narnia come from? And it sets everybody off on a grand adventure.
Oh,
I cannot wait.
Thank you.
yeah, that is really something to look forward to.
Yeah, I'm excited. We'll be having giveaways and talking about it before October, and I'm sure you ladies will get an early copy.
Ooh.
And I know.
Oops.
So I'm really excited about it. And I like I said, it was my touchstone during the pandemic. I had started it way before the pandemic, but it was the one, like, if I touched it every day, I felt a little more grounded. So.
Oh, that's awesome. That's going to make it even more special.
Thank you.
Well, I can't believe it, but we've gone an hour again almost. So we're
Wow,
almost
that
ready
seems
to
like
wrap
2
up.
minutes. Yeah.
Even with our
Yeah.
late start, we stayed a little bit longer. But Patti, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I just can't tell you how much Surviving Savannah meant to me as a reader.
Oh,
And it's just a story that needed to be told.
Thank you. And everyone
And
else.
it needed to be told by you.
By you,
oh,
yes.
Lisa. Well, first of all, Lisa and Brenda, my peanut butter and jelly. I adore you guys. I love everything you're doing. And everyone out there, I promise tomorrow I will go to the Facebook page and try to answer as many questions as I can. So if we didn't get to your question, I will show up and we'll talk about it all during the week. I'll keep going back until we get there. So y'all are amazing. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Oh, thank
we
you
love
so
talking
much.
with you.
Absolutely. Now, for our readers, I'll mention just a couple of things besides our special thanks to Patti for being part of our book club session tonight. Be sure to tune in this Wednesday night on the main Friends and Fiction page when the authors celebrate Christie's launch of Under the Southern Sky with cameos by Ellen Hildebrand and Wade Rouse, Viola Shipman.
Viola Shipman.
I hear there will
That's gonna
also
be fun.
I hear there will also be Friends in Fiction Theater, so I'm really excited about that.
Yeah. And I heard Christy announce it somewhere else today, so I can tell you too, her mom is going to show up.
Oh, yay.
Oh, yay. That's gonna be fun.
Oh, I can't wait for that. So you can grab any of the author's books this week at the Featured Bookstore, Booktown in Beachy, Manasquan, New Jersey. I hope I pronounced that right.
Manasquan.
Manasquan, thank you.
There you
It
go.
makes me think about last week when y'all were laughing about
Oh,
the
when we,
pronunciation.
I still won't say that bookstore's name. I won't do it.
I'll just say New Jersey.
There you
Beachy,
go.
New Jersey. Get 10% off this week on featured Fab 5 titles with the code FRIENDS in all caps. We mentioned it earlier, but I'll just say again, we'll have our very own Pub Day 30-minute session with Christy Woodson Harvey tomorrow, April 20th at 6 p.m. Eastern. And we have a happy hour and pre-Pub Day with Mary Kay Andrews and Ron Block on April 30th. Plus our regular book club discussion in May, discussing Christie's Under the Southern Sky. So we have a lot going on.
You have some fun stuff going on.
Now with the book
And
club.
I just want to say, for those of you that didn't catch it, yes, the book club on April 30th is with Mary Kay Andrews. That was a surprise, but we could not keep it from you any longer.
That's awesome.
So, surprise! You don't want to miss it.
That's awesome.
Absolutely. And you'll be hearing more about that later. But we got some great things coming up, and we're so excited that Patti was here tonight with us.
This
And
was so fun.
for all of the wonderful books that we've been able to read.
Thanks, you guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Oh, yes, let me.
We'll
Oh, I
hold up
can't
all
reach
the
it.
books. There you go. Love you
Oh,
guys.
Take care.
Love you guys.
Bye-bye.
See you tomorrow.
Yep, tomorrow, that's right.
I think I'm still live, so we'll see you tomorrow night at 6. Have a good night. Enjoy your reading.